you will own nothing, and you will be happy. That sentence, published by the World Economic Forum in 2016, became one of the most shared, most debated, and most feared phrases of the last decade. Some people read it as a vision of a sustainable, equitable future, a world without the burden of ownership, a world where you access everything you need without the inefficiency of possession. Other people read it as the most honest thing a globalist institution has ever accidentally said out loud. In June 2020, 3 months into a global pandemic that had shut down the world economy, Klaus Schwab launched the Great Reset. The 82-year-old German economist who founded the World Economic Forum saw the pandemic as what he called a narrow window of opportunity, a chance to redesign the global economic system from the ground up. And here is what almost nobody is telling you. The Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory. The agenda is published. The institutions pushing it are real. The financial infrastructure being built to implement it is already operational. And whether it makes you richer or poorer depends entirely on whether you understand what is actually happening. Today we look at it purely through a financial lens. What is being proposed, who benefits, what it means for your money, and why the most important question is not whether the Great Reset is real, but whether it is already too late to stop it. Chapter 1. What is the Great Reset actually? Strip away the conspiracy theories and the WEF propaganda, and here is what the Great Reset actually is. In July 2020, Klaus Schwab and French economist Thierry Malloret published a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. The core argument was straightforward. The pandemic had exposed the fragility of the existing economic system. Supply chains were broken, inequality had worsened, climate change was accelerating. The old system, financial capitalism driven by short-term shareholder returns, was producing outcomes that threatened the stability of civilization itself. Their proposed solution was stakeholder capitalism, a model in which corporations are accountable not just to shareholders, but to employees, communities, governments, and the planet. Environmental, social, and governance metrics, ESG, as the new standard for measuring corporate performance. Carbon pricing, progressive wealth redistribution, international coordination on tax policy to prevent capital flight, digital currencies under central bank control, universal basic income as automation displaces workers. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the published agenda of the most influential private forum in the world, attended every year by heads of state, central bank governors, the CEOs of the world's largest corporations, and the leaders of international institutions, including the IMF, World Bank, and United Nations. The question is not whether these ideas exist. They clearly do. The question is who benefits and who pays. Chapter 2. The financial architecture. The most financially significant element of the Great Reset is not the philosophical agenda. It is the infrastructure being built to implement it. Central Bank Digital Currencies, CBDCs. Over 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are now exploring or developing CBDCs. China's digital yuan is already in active use, with over 260 million wallets. The European Central Bank is developing the digital euro with a projected launch between 2026 and 2028. The Federal Reserve is studying a digital dollar. A CBDC is not just a digital version of existing currency. It is programmable money. A government can program a CBDC to expire if not spent by a certain date, eliminating saving. It can restrict what the money can be spent on. It can be turned off for specific individuals. It can be taxed automatically at the moment of transaction. It is the most powerful financial surveillance and control tool ever conceived. ESG as financial infrastructure. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager with $14 trillion under management, has made ESG the centerpiece of its investment strategy. In 2020, CEO Larry Fink declared that climate risk is investment risk and that BlackRock would begin exiting investments that present high sustainability-related risk. Every major asset manager, pension fund, and bank has since developed ESG frameworks. The financial implication is simple and profound. If the world's largest capital allocators only fund companies that meet ESG criteria, then companies that do not meet those criteria face higher costs of capital, higher borrowing costs, lower valuations, eventually, inability to raise capital at all. ESG is not just a reporting framework. It is a mechanism for redirecting capital flows at civilization scale. Chapter 3. Who benefits? This is the question mainstream coverage almost never asks, and it is the most financially important question of all. The Great Reset proposes more coordination, more centralized governance, more institutional oversight. Who benefits from these structures? The institutions that administer them. The IMF, World Bank, and BIS expand their mandates. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, who already have ESG infrastructure, gain competitive advantage over smaller competitors who cannot afford compliance costs. Large corporations absorb ESG reporting and carbon pricing. Small businesses cannot. Developed nations gain leverage over smaller economies that historically competed on lower taxes. The Great Reset structurally advantages size. Large institutions, large corporations, large governments, at the expense of small businesses, individual investors, and developing economies. This is not a conspiracy. It is an emergent property of the proposed architecture. Chapter 4. The Pushback. The pushback has come from 4 directions. The political right argues that unelected globalist institutions have no democratic mandate to redesign sovereign economies. Emerging market economies argue that carbon pricing and ESG standards make it impossible for developing nations to industrialize the way developed economies did, through cheap fossil fuels. Free market economists argue that stakeholder capitalism, accountable to everyone, is accountable to no one. ESG scores are determined by opaque rating agencies. The result is virtue signaling dressed up as governance, and the performance data is damning. In 2022, ESG funds significantly underperformed as energy stocks, excluded from most ESG portfolios, surged 60% following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The argument that ESG delivers superior returns remains deeply contested. Chapter 5. What is actually happening in 2026? The Great Reset as a brand has faded. The WEF quietly dropped the term around 2022, but the agenda has not disappeared. It is being implemented incrementally, without the branding. CBDCs are accelerating. China's digital yuan is operational. The digital euro launches between 2026 and 2028. Project M-Bridge completed its first real cross-border transactions in 2024. ESG is now institutional infrastructure. Despite anti-ESG legislation in over 20 US states, ESG frameworks are embedded in virtually every major bank, pension fund, and asset manager on Earth. 50,000 European companies must report detailed ESG data under EU law from 2024. The OECD Global Minimum Tax, 15% agreed by 136 countries, took effect in 2024. For the first time in history, a global tax floor exists. The Great Reset's specific proposals may be contested, but the underlying trends, financialization of sustainability, centralization of monetary infrastructure, global tax coordination, are all advancing, just without the branding. Chapter 6. How to financially prepare for this. The Great Reset has direct portfolio implications. CBDCs reduce the privacy and autonomy of cash. Hard assets, gold, real estate, commodities, become more attractive as hedges against programmable money. Central bank gold buying hit record levels in 2024 and 2025. That is not a coincidence. ESG as capital allocation means companies with poor ESG scores face structural capital disadvantage. Understanding which sectors are being systematically defunded is essential for long-term portfolio construction. 15% global minimum tax reduces the advantage of tax haven structuring. Large tech companies that benefited most from aggressive tax optimization face higher effective rates. This is already being priced in. The concentration risk is the most underappreciated. The Great Reset architecture advantages size, and this is already visible in markets where index concentration in the largest tech companies has reached historic highs. Whether that concentration is sustainable is the central financial question of our time. The financial architecture of the Great Reset is being built whether you agree with it or not. The question is, what to do with your money? Gold. Central banks have been buying gold at record rates for 3 consecutive years. China, Russia, India, Poland, Turkey, all accumulating gold while quietly reducing dollar reserves. Gold is the one asset no government can freeze, no CBDC can replace, and no ESG framework can defund. That is not a coincidence. That is a signal. Hard assets. In a world of programmable money and ESG-driven capital flows, physical assets that cannot be digitally controlled become structurally more valuable. Real estate, farmland, energy infrastructure. These assets have intrinsic value, regardless of what the monetary system does around them. Own productive assets. The single most powerful response to "you will own nothing" is to own something. Equities in companies that produce real things, energy, food, technology, infrastructure, represent ownership of productive capacity that retains value regardless of monetary system changes. Reduce CBDC exposure. As digital currencies roll out, holding significant wealth in bank deposits increases your exposure to programmable money risk. Diversifying into assets outside the digital monetary system is basic risk management, not conspiracy thinking. Geographic diversification. Not all countries are implementing this agenda at the same pace. Singapore, Switzerland, UAE, actively competing for capital with lower taxes and stronger property rights. Understanding where capital is flowing is increasingly important for long-term wealth preservation. The Great Reset is not a secret plan executed in shadows. It is a published agenda pursued openly by the most powerful institutions in the world. Whether you see it as a necessary redesign of a broken system or as the most dangerous concentration of economic power in modern history depends on whether you trust the institutions proposing it. What is not in dispute is that the infrastructure is being built. Digital currencies, ESG frameworks, global tax coordination, AI as macroeconomic force. The question for every investor is simple. Will this architecture make you richer or poorer? And what are you going to do about it? If you want to understand how to navigate a changing global financial system, check out my complete investing masterclass video. Link in the description. Please, if you enjoyed, subscribe and leave a like. See you next time.